enterprise that is based here in Rwanda. And we build the leadership and the self-confidence of women and girls in East Africa. So this is a big, big month for us. Excited about it. I'm also a mom of 3 little amazing humans. I'm a wife. I'm a champion for social equity, but especially gender equality. It's very near and dear to my heart. And my superpower is the power of connection. I love people. I love connecting with people. Since you're inviting me to shine, I'll say I'm really good at connecting with people. And then I've also grown to learn how to connect people. So when I see people who align in their values, their mission, their interests, and I think they can learn from each other and grow from each other, I bring them together and build these connections. And I really enjoy doing it. So that's my superpower.
Hi.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing with us. Go ahead, Chara.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to share. I hope you can hear me as well. My name is Chara ITOKA. I am the CEO of the ITOKA group, which hence is my group, but it's a strategic capacity development firm. I'm also the advisor for Women Deliver on global dialogue and regional convening partnerships. And Women Deliver is a gender equality advocacy organization. So gender equality is very important to me. My superpower, I would say, is authenticity. I'm the person that cannot not be myself. I have to be myself, basically. 2 negatives, I have to be myself. And I also pride myself in the ability to encourage others to be your most authentic self. Through that, you will fulfill your purpose, you can live out your passion, and you don't have to perform. So I am based in Kigali, Rwanda.
Amazing. What a superpower. I wish we could all embrace being authentic. It's hard to be authentic, especially when you're a woman. A lot of pressure will come to that. But thank you so much for modeling that superpower and sharing. Dorcas?
Oh, wow. I feel on the spot after speaking after all these 2 amazing ones. So yeah, my name is Dorcas RUTUNDA. I'm the managing director at ITM Africa. We are a human resource firm. We like to call ourselves the HR of HRs. And as a person, I love everything art, everything that has to do with expression. That's why Chara is one of my favorite people. The more genuine things are, the better for me. My superpower is I'm great at everything that I do. And I like to make people great. So I like to find, and I do find hidden gems in people, and I like to point it out, make sure that those hidden gems are shown to the world. So that's pretty much me.
Can I testify that it's true that everything you touch just have, there is an effect to that. I can definitely testify to that. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your superpower. I think everybody is inspired here. If you guys are inspired, please type yes. We want to see those massive yes if you're as inspired as I am. So this panel is inspired by this month's mantra. We're celebrating women, the achievements towards gender equality. We're still very, very far away. I'm not even going to count the number of years we have to, go to before we reach gender equality. But I want to hear from you all. What does International Women's Day mean to you? We'll start again with Norette and Chara and Dorcas.
Sure. So for me, International Women's Day, I have to say, like, when I was younger, it was definitely about like celebrating women, our femininity, our strength. So I was on board with like being pampered and all these things. But as I grew up, especially professionally, I started really understanding that, it is a day, or International Women's Month is a whole month around talking about gender equity or gender equality. and really understanding that it is about women's rights and us as women not accessing our rights fully or as equally as men do, and growing in the understanding of what it actually looks like in the day-to-day, which goes from, you know, women not having equal access to opportunities, whether they're economic or social. It gets down to violence against women. It goes around, you know, rights of women's accessing land equally or finances. So there are so many layers, and as you're saying, he's like, we couldn't even get into all of them today, but I've really shifted my view around what this day means or the month means, because it is about women's rights and making sure that there is equity, and spending a month acknowledging that there are gaps, learning about the gaps and talking about them. So thank you for creating a forum like this to do that. And learning from it, and then trying to learn the learning into action. Because often we sit and we talk about all these horrible things that are happening, but it's like, where's the action? Like, what can we actually do about it? You know, and celebrating successes. Also, I think I don't know if some of you in Kigali especially saw RDB did like a Break the Bias campaign that had pictures of women in completely different sectors. There were pilots, there were, you know, CEOs of multi-million-dollar organizations, women in sciences, and celebrating that, you know, seeing that there is change, there is representation, to me is also part of International Women's Day. So it's a day to celebrate, but a day to fight and to learn. And I think Chara will go next.
All right, great, thank you. So similar to Norette, I always appreciated International Women's Day, International Women's Month, because it's an opportunity to kind of spotlight some of the complex issues that women are facing all over the world, and also amplify the work, the great work that women are doing, because there are situations where women are not getting credit for the work that they're doing. So we want to amplify that. But I really appreciate this year's theme. It's extra special to me, because first I was a little bit taken aback, like, wow, okay, we're gonna go there this month. It really resonates with me because I've had some experiences, which I think a lot of you have had, with bias, with discrimination, with glass ceilings at work, with stereotypes, and just real lived out experiences that can be dismissed often, and you know, people don't really want to talk about it because some of it is unintentional, some of it is unconscious bias. I just found it to be so intriguing and opening up a large conversation that I wanted to be a part of. So this year's theme really resonates with me. It hits home because of my own personal experience.
Amazing. I think we all went through this, and I really want to see in the chat box, if you have experienced any gender bias, like Chara just said, please type in I. I'm typing I because I have, definitely. And we're about to hear all of these stories and how we actually break those. Dorcas, take it over.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to echo what Norette and Chara just said. It really, for me, is two things. It's all about, yes, celebrating women, all kinds of women, all from any background and any status and any kind of magic they're creating at any level, and also celebrating their rights and how far we've come in that area. But also kind of a reminder and call to action that there is still work that needs to be done. There are still things that are not addressed yet. There are still numbers that shouldn't be the way they are. So for me, it really is in terms of celebrating women, the power of women. I've seen some people complain on the internet and say, this is not Mother's Day. I guess for some, they felt like the one woman they wanted to celebrate was their mother. But for me, it feels like it's an extension of not just Mother's Day, Sisters Day, no, Women's Day, you know, all kinds of women, but also a reminder of these women that we're celebrating and the rights that they've achieved. Today, there's more to be done. There's things that they still face. There's still a lot of work to do. So more of a call to action and a reminder not to settle. So I like that it comes every year. Every year, even for me, I have to reflect and see what is it that I'm doing? What is it that I'm contributing to this? So that's pretty much.
A year not to settle, a reminder to not settle every year. I love this. I really wanted to have your take and your personal experience. When Norette, you said when you're little, what happened to you? Like, did your gender ever influence your career choice? Either be it your education or the current career that you pursued?
So when I was little, I grew up in Burundi, family of 5, 3 girls and 2 boys. And I have to say that my parents actually raised us pretty equally in terms of education. Like, we were all expected to bring excellent grades regardless of, we were boys and girls, same expectation in terms of going to school, and they really pushed it. So I didn't really think about it much, about what my gender, like what impact it would have on me. Then I went to university, and my first job out of university was with a group of financial advisors in this like global investment firm. Can you hear me? Oh, I think it's somebody that muted. So what I was saying is that I worked in this group of financial advisors, a very high performing group. As soon as I started with them, I got all my licenses to be able to trade in the stock market as in the investment sector, got my license to be able to sell insurance. But what I'd already realized, like from day one, was that all the men were financial advisors, the women were client associates or assistants or executive assistants. And from the get-go, I was like, ooh, I probably don't belong in this financial advisory role with men in suits who, like seemed aggressive and all that. So even though I had all my licenses and I could do the job, I settled for like a senior registered client associate role. And did that for a while, and I kind of like hid in that little role. And then one day, a friend who's male, who was a financial advisor, like really asked in the most casual way, like, but why aren't you a financial advisor? And like, for a second, I felt found out, the fact that I'd been playing small and now somebody actually called it out in a very gentle way and be like, but why are you doing this for? And I think that was the first time that I really started thinking about, I don't feel like I belong. I'm definitely struggling with the confidence issue here, and that I didn't create it. Like, this cannot be a no-heads issue, right? I'm not seeing women around me, so I don't feel like I can do this. So it's always, that was like sort of the beginning of really being attracted to gender issues and understanding what the confidence gap is. So while in a way, my gender influenced my career choice, where I stayed in this small box for years, now it's also influenced the career that I am, being a gender equality advocate, being the ED of an organization that builds self-confidence in women, right? Like, I really wanted to understand how to dismantle it. And here in Rwanda, we've been doing this work for 8 years now, partnering with the organization to tackle that exact issue of women, of being made to feel like we can achieve because of the spaces we grew up in.
What I love about your story is the power of allies. And I love that it's a man who stepped in, and I'm very glad that there are men on this panel, because when we see the eyes in the chat box and girls saying or ladies saying we've experienced gender biases, I'm pretty sure men as well have experienced these with their coworkers, and it's very important to be a part of this as an ally, and I'm very glad that you pointed out that point. Chara, what's your experience with this? Did your gender influence your career choice or career growth?
I wouldn't say that it impacted my career choice, but it definitely shaped my experience. Like, it is something that I've had to navigate. Looking back, since Norette is talking about her childhood, I grew up in a strong female-headed home, actually. I'm from Liberia, and we had a civil conflict for 14 years. So there was one point my family was separated, and so it was my mom and 3 girls. I'm the youngest of 3. So I'm growing up as an immigrant, and I realized that I had a good foundation, but I was always keenly aware of my gender, especially at work. I've had some great female bosses. You have these female bosses that could intentionally champion your work, which is great. I've also had female bosses that saw younger women in the organization as a threat. So that is something you have to put out there, because it happens. And that can sometimes be discouraging instead of being like encouraged. I've had some bosses that have been like, okay, you kind of go to the side. I've also been in very male-dominated environments. When I went back home to Liberia, I was working at the Ministry of Planning, and I observed that I needed to be very intentional about having, like, carving out a space for myself in order to have an impact, because it was a bit of an old boys club. And at one point I was the most senior woman at the ministry. So, and I would hear comments like, oh, you're the age of my daughter, or, you know, like, like, you just go do something else. Like, you can't really sit at this table. And I had to sit at that table. You know, I had to be assertive and be very intentional about the type of work that I was doing and how I wanted to, like, kind of shape my experience at the ministry. So I would say that although it didn't help me decide what industry to go into, as I was working through various industries, I was very much aware that, yes, I am a woman. Yes, I carry all the things that I carry with me, but it's not going to limit me. I am always going to have a voice. I'm going to assert myself in order to have an impact.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing your story. So now, Dorcas, I know your story is completely different because you stepped into the, you know, the career that is especially manly, and you took it over. So I want you to link this question with the second one, which is about examples of what are the gender biases in the workplace.
Oh, wow, this is going to be long. I hope you guys are ready. For me, I would say the same. It's not really that it shaped, as in I was a woman, therefore I chose this career path. It was actually a little bit of a reverse. So I've done engineering at university and high school. I did sciences, but that choice particularly was really, it came from this one time. I think I was like 15, and that's when you get to choose combinations of what to do in upper high school. And there was this family member who was suggesting that I do things like accounting and anything that would lead me into business administration, because he said that's what's more fitting for a woman. And I wanted to do sciences, and he was like, what do you mean sciences and engineering? That's too high. That's not a woman's job. And I remember from that time, I decided that I was going to pursue sciences and engineering, and I will not stop. And so that's the path that I took. And funny enough, when I actually shifted careers after university, I had a little bit of guilt because I felt like I was giving up on that promise that I had made myself of, you know, challenging it, of you know, facing that. But then again, I realized that I was living a life for somebody else. I was trying to prove a point, which technically I proved. But then I shifted, and then I shifted into a different environment, and now I found myself in this space that is, you know, a leadership position where not so many women are there, and those that are there get to face a lot of biases. So I would say yes, like Chara, I would say that it did not dictate, but it did shape the experience for sure up to today. Yeah, and maybe let me, as you said, let me just continue and talk about maybe a few examples of the gender biases that we find in the workplace. Us being in the HR space and mostly recruitment, there is one thing that we like to correct whenever we get a client and we receive a job description. So you will find a job description that says we're recruiting for a, let's say, CFO. And the first line says, he should have 5 years, 10 years of experience. And then it goes, he should speak English or French. So some things are very micro, but they matter in sometimes because it's going to influence the person who's going to read it will understand that this is a man they're looking for. But not just in that sense, though, that's a very little, like a very small aspect, but in a sense as well, where you find this mindset where there are roles that are fit for a specific gender. And like Norette just said, like you'll find that senior financial roles, people feel like it's a man's job because it's very analytical and men are focused and they like to, you know, they can focus on numbers. And you'll find some jobs such as assistant, for example, they say, oh no, women are multitaskers, you know, they can do a lot of things at the same time, they're organized. And you'll find some jobs such as marketing. They say, oh, it's great to have a woman as the face of the company. So yeah, that's some of the examples of gender biases, but there's actually more where you'll find in terms of like promotion. There was actually a study that showed that women are promoted based on merit and men are promoted based on potential. And this is what it's mostly, sometimes it's even unconscious, where you feel like, oh yeah, I see this guy and I feel like in a few years I can see him becoming this big guy, and you see a woman and you're like, I'm not very sure, let's give her some time, let's let her prove herself and we'll see. And this is actually very apparent in the workplace. And some other kind of biases, there's a bias, by the way, that I think it's quite specific for Rwanda. And this is because, again, Rwanda is one of the champions of gender equality globally. You know, we are in the top ranks in terms of women in positions of power, of women empowerment and all of that. So you'll find a lot of people say, oh, they're in that position because they're a woman. Like, you know, it's Rwanda, so they had to fill the quota. And this actually is very, it's very bad because it dismisses the actual work that people have done to get to where they are. You will sit at a table and people will say, oh, of course you're here. There had to be a woman. And it has nothing to do with your gender. You're there because you worked hard. You're there because you actually deserve to be, but because there's this understanding that, oh, Rwanda always wants to make sure that there's women in this number, that this quota they have to fill, therefore they will bring someone who's undeserving, which most of the time whenever I hear such a claim and you actually look at the context, you find it's not true. Most, if not all of these women are in these positions because they deserve to be in there. So that kind of creates a bias where you will want to work with someone and they already feel like, oh no, you can't do the job, you're just there as a picture, or you will be assigned to certain things because they feel like you're much more prone to do them, and you won't be believed to achieve just because you feel like you won't be able to perform it because you're a woman. So yeah, I think there's so many, I know everyone here, all the people who said I have experienced a certain form of bias in the workplace, but these are what I would call like the surface level of the biggest ones that happen in the workplace.
Thank you for sharing those, Dorcas. When you were saying, you know, the example of Rwanda, I just remembered one example of female in leadership position or who get promotion. The number one bias is that they had to sleep with a male boss to get there. And this is something that is really global and that we should all be mindful about. The kind of, as you're saying, the micro things that matter, the he in front of a job description, the words we say in the corridors. I mean, all of us can be allies, again, as I said earlier, in the contribution towards reducing the gender biases. Thank you so much, Dorcas, for that. Chara, tell us from your experience in the education system, what are some examples of these gender biases and how do we fix this?
Thank you. Before I share my perspective, I want to say also I like that Dorcas brought up this issue of tokenism, or people automatically thinking you're in a position and you're just there as a token, position without any power. So I think that is really interesting. I would love to unpack that one day. So gender bias in the education system, I think it really starts when you're young. Those of us who are parents, we can see it because you will see in the classroom that there are different expectations for girl students than they have for boy students. And I'm a boy mom, so I don't have a daughter, but still you'll see it even at the university level, which I'll talk about a little bit more. Having young women in the classroom when I was teaching at African Leadership University, we had conversations around gender and development, and students started to reflect on how in some schools, the bar, especially in math and science, is lowered for the female students because, you know, in the classroom, they talked about, oh, well, girls menstruate. So they can't really do math and science. They have to kind of slow down at certain points of the month. And I'm like, which part of Rwanda is this? Like, you know, women menstruate and they fly airplanes and they lead entire countries, but we can break that one down too. So women are very capable. Other people brought up the issue of women having smaller brains than men. I'm like, this day and age, and people still actually think that women have smaller brains. And so while our young people are growing up, you'll find that girls are guided away from certain topics, from certain industries, like don't focus on science, don't focus on technology, as Dorcas said, focus maybe on secretarial work, or maybe you could be maybe an admin, but not necessarily the CEO, not necessarily the boss, because women are thought of as being bossy. When you see a young woman in the classroom constantly giving the presentations, leading, being very strategic, being very analytical, people call her bossy. And I hope she would say, yeah, I'm a boss. You know, I'm not being bossy, but they don't call guys bossy. They call them, oh, this is strong leadership skills. Like, oh, and he becomes popular and he becomes favored. So we start to see that happening, which is obviously bad for all of the reasons I mentioned, but also bad because the world needs us to align our purpose and our passion in a way that we can find solutions to the many challenges that we have. We desperately need people to live out their purpose. And if a woman is guided, a young girl is guided away from a certain industry that she could have a great impact in because she is a woman, then we will all not benefit from her fulfilling her passion, her fulfilling her purpose. I wanted to also talk about later on, as I worked in academia, I found that there were stereotypes as well, even being in faculty. You will see a discrepancy between the behaviors that a man can exhibit without negative consequence. So a man might be very outspoken, and people might say, okay, that's really positive. He's a real go-getter. Wow, let's promote him. A woman is being very outspoken. Oh, she complains too much. Or, you know, I wish she wasn't, she's angry. That's another one that comes up, especially women of color, especially African women, Black women around the world. You hear that they're being angry when they're being assertive, or they're really standing their ground. I've seen there have been opportunities, but there have been times where I felt voiceless in meetings because I was a minority to start with. So there weren't many women there, or someone else would speak and I wouldn't get the space to speak, or colleagues may speak over a woman, a male peer may get more credit or get credit for something that a woman actually accomplishes. So all of those things, plus a lack of female representation, are biases that I've seen either in academia, or you can say in any workplace, and then also within the education system.
Oh, thank you so much, Chara, for sharing. I think really one of the reasons we're having this conversation today is because there are things that we are learning, and we're shocked to hear that, you know, some people are, I saw Norette's face like, what? This happened? And this is exactly why we are here. We're here to learn things that are shocking so that we have the courage and the boldness to actually do something about it. Awareness, I think, is the best key to remove any gender bias and to actually unlearn these practices. And I want to ask Norette this question. What are some of the ways these unconscious biases affect women on a daily basis? Chara and Dorcas just shared amazing examples, and I think it would be interesting to know from your perspective, as someone who works with women on a daily basis and who's a gender advocate, to tell us, how does this really affect us as women?
Sure. And yes, you probably saw my face. I was processing the smaller brain than men. I don't think I'd ever heard that one. That took me a second here to process. But how does gender bias affect women on the daily basis? I mean, it does. It affects us in so many ways. And I can think of sort of like 3 categories that I can share about now, because they can affect us in like big ways that are obvious that everybody sees, and then subtle ways that aren't harder to see, and ways that are very impactful, and those that are less impactful in the moment, but over a long period of time can become exhausting for us as women especially. I'd say the first one is like the systemic level type of gender bias, which is at an organizational level, at a system level, things like the pay gap and women being paid less, and literally women being offered a lesser salary for the same job because somebody in their mind somehow made that decision that, as Dorcas was pointing out in her example, maybe she'll need to prove herself before we actually offer her a certain salary. Or again, at the systemic level, things around policies and how workplaces are not necessarily designed for women in many ways, thinking about policies where a job may require frequent travel, for example. And they don't think about a new mother who's breastfeeding, who may not be able to travel or would have to make the difficult decision to stop breastfeeding if she has to travel frequently. And how do you adapt policies and make it easier for women maybe to travel with a child? Or how do you work around it so you're not systemically excluding someone based on their gender, or a woman just looking at it from the beginning and saying, this is not for me, because obviously it's not going to adapt to who I am and what my needs are. The second one is it's like those smaller scale daily little biases or things that happen to women in the workplace that make it hard sometimes to navigate it. And what I mean by that is those little microaggressions that happen. I'll share a quick example, which is I shared an office while I was working for this organization for a short period of time. And I shared an office with a man. And one day I walked in wearing a dress. And it was like a knee length type of dress. And he was like, oh, you have beautiful legs. I didn't know. And I was like, that is not an appropriate comment, but and then we went into a 30-minute conversation or debate of him explaining to me that it wasn't an appropriate conversation or appropriate comment. And what made me realize is, I'm older, I feel like I know my rights. I can, I could push back and be like, wait a minute, this wasn't right. And then in that moment, thinking of younger women who have to navigate the same microaggressions, sometimes aggressions, because this is sexual harassment at its basic level. And how do we change these biases for people to understand that this is not okay? And for women to not bear the burden of advocating for 30 minutes for themselves, or being in positions often where they can't even advocate for themselves because they're too young, they're too new, So it's like these little daily incidents, for lack of a better word, that make it harder for women to navigate the workplace. And then the third one is it's more of the unconscious bias that is the little voice in our head, I think, where as women, because we've internalized all these messages, now we're the ones like projecting these, this bias against ourselves sometimes. It's, as an example, the confidence gap that I was talking about earlier. So being able to identify that voice as a first step and saying, wait a minute, why do I think that this job isn't appropriate for me? Is it because I'm not qualified for it? Or is it because somebody told me I wasn't good enough for it? Or because it wasn't representation? And then learning to mute that voice, which is a process. It doesn't happen over time. At Resonate, we're in the business of doing that. But even as we know that, it's a lifelong journey where you're learning to fully be confident in how amazing we are, how strong we are, how intelligent we are, and really that we belong to be in those spaces and like own them fully, right? So yeah, those are sort of the three examples I thought I'd share today.
Oh, what a wow. I think all of us, personally, I could resonate with your experience. And I think it's good that we have an HR practitioner to tell us what should leaders do to cultivate cultures at the workplace that really foster gender equality and that the kind of culture that is going to protect the young intern who just walked in and who doesn't have a voice yet, a strong voice to stand against, a man in power, in a powerful position. Tell us, Dorcas, in your experience, what do you think leaders should be doing today?
I believe in order to bring in a new culture or to bring all these good practices, we need to have a cultural audit, if I might. Try to assess what are the things in our organization that we've normalized? What are the things that happen on a daily? And you'll be surprised once you do such an audit, because, you know, even for finance, when you do an audit, that's when you start looking at the things that shouldn't be there, things that shouldn't be done in this way, where you couldn't see them when doing your day-to-day activities. So really assessing, looking at the entire, from the organizational structure. How is our structure? Where are the women in our structure? Why aren't there women in certain departments? Why do we have more women in this department? How is our day-to-day? How are our policies? What does our policy say? Something like that, something about that. Do we have a sexual harassment policy, for example? Do we have channels? What if such a case happens? What are the channels? So really assessing. And once you do such an audit, that's when you're going to find out that there is so much that's missing that no one thought was necessary. No one thought it was a problem until it was. So yeah, such an audit will also help you tackle issues that are specific to your organization. Because, for example, we can talk about like the gender pay gap, for example. I think this is a much more common issue in the you know, the West and the North, where like more countries in the US, Europe, and Asia as well have that. And so if you come, for example, and you start implementing, oh, no gender gap, and maybe that's not an issue we currently have in Rwanda or in the organization. So having organizational audit, or just to say, how is our culture? What are the things that are wrong? And also contextualizing it, because as you say, those microaggressions, sometimes they're cultural by nature. So people, as much as it's written somewhere in the organization processes and procedures, people don't believe in that because you know, those things. So, and that's another way that it will change your approach, because you will know it's not about what's written in the book from the HR department. It's actually how people think and how do you dismantle that. So first analyzing on where are the problems, how do we tackle them, will come naturally from that. And once now you start tackling the problem from the root, it's easier now. Creating safe spaces, I think it starts with language, communication. As a leader of a business, what you say matters. And then doing it, showing it, proving it, being intentional about your action. But before that, you have to actually word it out. If you feel something is inappropriate, don't just go to the HR and say, oh, go follow up with this issue. No, raise it right there and then, and make it clear that this is not okay. We don't treat women like this in this organization. We don't say this to women in this organization. This is not who we are. If a client is treating your female staff in a very different way, as much as their client, make sure you, for example, if it's that junior person, if it's that intern, that person won't speak for themselves, do not wait until the client is gone so that you come back and say, oh, I'm sorry. No, word it out right there and then. Show them that you actually offer them. You actually mean what you said. So it's not just about policies, and policies are very important, but it's about those daily little activities and words that you say and mean them. So that's a start. And then the bigger work, of course, will be made as you grow, but it will already show a message, because you lead by example again. So don't expect people to follow you in terms of gender equality and being an ally or being a gender champion without you showing it day in, day out.
Great tips, Dorcas. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I really want to encourage everybody. All of us here are leaders. And I want to encourage you to go and start this conversation. Go and check what is the system that you have, what's your culture, and use this month as a month of awareness and starting a conversation already so that certain things can start to change, not just for you, but for even the generations to come. Chara, I would like to ask you this one, and it's an advisor tip for men. How do you think men should chip in? What should be their part in this? Because I really believe gender inequality is not just a conversation for women. Together we're stronger. Otherwise, if we just make it an issue for women to solve, it's going to take us more years to achieve. So what do you think men should do to empower and support women in this cause?
Thank you. This is so important because it's like having a gender-based violence workshop without men. It doesn't make sense, right? Like, we have to work together. Allyship is important, and allyship cannot be performative. It must be practiced. I agree with that 200%. So here are my tips. Number one, you have to listen with the goal of understanding, not listening so that you can say something. You know, when you're listening, but you're just about to jump in, or you're half listening, or you're pretending to listen. You really need to listen well, and not from a defensive place. I've sat in conversations with men about gender equality, about women's rights. Automatically they shut down because they think, oh, this is feminism, this is negative, and they may not understand even what these terms mean or what these philosophies are about, but they shut down. So you have to listen from a place of, I really want to understand, and I'm not being defensive. That's step one. And then at least you're positioned to have that kind of conversation when you decide, I'm going to listen to you, I'm not going to jump over you. You would need to stop mansplaining. For those of you that may not know what mansplaining is when a man explains something to a woman in a very condescending way, very patronizing way, as if she is not smart, or you're talking down to her. So if you're going to have this kind of conversation and you have a goal of understanding and you want to be an ally, you have to put mansplaining to the side. I would say also you need to educate yourself. Education should not only be about what you hear on the news or something you saw on social media. I'm sorry, pick up a book. You need to educate yourself about privilege, your own privilege. Educate yourself about biases, your role in perpetuating systems of discrimination and inequality. Whoa, that makes people very defensive automatically, because they'd say, oh, no, I'm a good person. I'm a good guy. I date, people, date women, or I'm a dad, or I'm this and I'm that. I have sisters. No, we all need to sit, because we all have levels of privilege, myself included. So you need to sit and say, what is my privilege? How am I playing a role, unintentionally maybe, in order to continue this system of discrimination and inequality? Because we're all moving, we don't move in silos. We're moving in a way that we impact each other. So you may think that you're a champion for women just because you do not beat women, but that doesn't mean you're a champion for women. So that's a whole nother long discussion we could have. I would say also, do not rely on women to educate you. As I say, educate yourself. Don't sit there and say, okay, well, why don't you tell me? I get this all the time. Why don't you tell me all of this? And every single, and then I think, well, this is an education. This is a moment for education, like a teaching moment, but I don't have 5 hours to teach you everything that I've studied and lived as a woman or studied in gender studies. You need to also do the work. I'm not going to do all the labor in this conversation. So to be an ally means you're ready to labor as well. Co-laborer in this gender inequality process and journey. Continue to do your homework. Make sure that the books you're reading are relevant, the articles you're reading are current, not from 1954. Make sure you attend diversity and inclusion events, all of that. And then go forth and play your role as an advocate. Remember, rhetoric is just rhetoric, kind of like what Dorcas said. Practice is queen. Practice is everything. So live it out, live out your principles.
Such a powerful insight, Chara. Thank you so much for that talk. I think one of the biggest challenge we have is when people explain to you your own challenge instead of listening. So that is crazy. Like, we need to have a safe space for women to have this conversation and come up. And I really wanted to challenge women who are in leadership positions today to make sure that before this end of month, because the conversation is still going on, to really use this moment to call the men on the table and ask them, be bold enough to say, listen to our voices. I know that, the business will try to commercialize this day and offer women flowers, celebrate them. But the goal and purpose of Women's Day or Women's Month is not just to celebrate the achievement done so far, but really to do everything possible to use the privilege that we have today to close as much as possible this gender gap. And I'm very grateful to Chara for, not sugarcoating it and really going straight to the point of what needs to be done. So we're starting the Q&A session. If you want to ask any question to any of the panel members, please type in your question or unmute yourself, and we will give you a word precise who you would like to address this question so that it's easy. So I will start reading the first question. Hi, my name is Linda. I'm a lawyer. Thank you for the conversation. My question is, as a young lady aiming to be a leader, how can I create a space for the people I lead where there will be no gender biases or norms? The question can be taken by anybody. Norette, please take us through this one. I think you're muted, Norette.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can now.
Cool. I was saying thank you to Linda for asking this question. Excuse me. I would say that Dorcas talked about creating or like leading a cultural audit, which I love that word. I hadn't heard that term before, but I think as a start, having a checkpoint for how am I doing, I think would be the starting point. And then in addition to that, I would say embedding the culture that you want in the values of your organization is a way to start tackling the gender biases. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you the example of Resonate, where I am. We are an organization, that stands for building leadership for women and girls. So at the start, we have to be very conscious and intentional about tackling gender biases. In our organizational values, a couple of them that I can share, for example, is one of our values is believe in yourself. We want women who are joining our organization, or men, to understand that believing in themselves is part of their journey within their organization. And that is one way of helping them tackle this confidence gap that they may not have. And we set up processes, we set up stretch projects, we do things to let them, believe in themselves and tackle challenges and try new things that normally they wouldn't have maybe tried out. Another one of our values is belief in others. What we're trying to tackle here, Chara shared earlier about working with female bosses in the past who weren't as supportive as she would have expected them to be, being women. So for us, one of our values is believe in others, believe in other women, give them chances, let them learn from you. Let them, lead the way because you've been there, what they're going through as a new person, for example, trying to figure out what their career looks like. Another value is keep learning, because we know that as women, we may not have access to many opportunities as men. We may not have access to the networks, the bars where men get to connect and actually deals get made and things like that. We're very intentional in saying, keep learning so that as a woman, you have that chance to better yourself and access these opportunities as equally as men do. So all these to say, just these examples of start with culture. What is the culture of your organization, however big or small it is, then provide a framework or a space for the young women to, for employees in general, to tackle these biases by giving them permission through the values of the organization, if that makes sense, hopefully.
Love it. Thank you so much for answering this question so amazingly. Linda, start preaching to all the women in your organization to believe in themselves, as Norette said. That is really powerful. We talked about how men believe in themselves even when they're not super qualified. So why shouldn't we as women believe in ourselves? So throw in the challenge Let's start believing in ourselves. Thank you so much, Norette, for the answer. We have a next question by Bailey, and this one goes to Dorcas for sure. What should women do to negotiate better salaries? Dorcas, I think you're still muted. We're coming to 5 minutes before the end of our session. If you have any question, please drop it as soon as possible in the comment. Thank you. Dorcas, take over.
Yes, thank you, Belinda, for the question. And I'm going to answer it just the same way I would answer to anybody who struggles with salary negotiation. The first thing is base it on proof of work, on the things that you've done and achieved. If you know and you have done all this work and you know that's your worth, then definitely do not budge because you're a woman. Building up confidence, as Norette was saying, is a process. It takes time, but you need to repeat this to yourself. And I don't know about you guys, but I like facts. Facts make me comfortable because at least they're in front of me and there's nothing I can do about it. And that's the best way to actually overcome the confidence gap, is to tell yourself the truths. The truth is, I've actually done this job. I've done this work for this number of years. I have all the requirements that are set, that they are looking for. And this is a job that I know I will thrive at because I've done it before, and I have the capacity to do even better. So that should build up your confidence, not just yourself, but when you're speaking to the interviewers, you should tell them, this is why I'm asking for the salary. It's not demanding, by the way. It's asking what you're worth, and you should stick by it. And as any other, I will add in a little bit of a negotiation tip. You should always have a walkaway number. You should have a number below which you will not sit in that room. You will say, thank you very much for your opportunity, but I do not believe that we can work together. And that's not rude, by the way. That is not rude. That is not being prideful. It is just being truthful. And once you stick to the facts, trust me, the confidence gap, feeling like you're being too much or you're demanding, those are gonna fade away, because those are lies that you tell to yourself. And that's, again, that's what creates that imposter syndrome that a lot of women face, by the way. But whenever you overcome that using, I've done this work, this is what you guys are looking for, and this is exactly what I'm bringing, and this is the worth of it, trust me, it will work. And if you need more coaching, listen, I don't know if we're gonna drop, my LinkedIn is open. You can always DM me and even find me at my office. I'm very, very available. We can talk about it more, but use facts. They'll help you build the confidence.
Thank you so much, Dorcas, for the answer. We have a last question from Delise. Chara, please share with her how do we overcome the unconscious biases?
Okay. Great. So I'll try to be brief in my response because we don't have a lot of time. But so I want to just, full disclosure, I don't believe personally that gender bias will permanently ever go away, because we are dealing with human beings. But I do believe that we could greatly reduce it, okay, especially within an organization, if we continue to hold people accountable. So gender biases flourish when they go unchecked. So you must check them. You must, as we talked about earlier, you must analyze biases in hiring in an organization. You must go comb through your policies. You must have your staff, or even as an individual, take tests. They're actually implicit bias tests that you can take. One was created by a Harvard University I guess department, called the implicit association test. Take one of those tests, get to know yourself very well. I feel a lot of us don't know ourselves very well. Check yourself, even hold yourself accountable. That's when we'll see gender biases going down. We all carry biases. It could be socioeconomic, it could be stereotypes we have about other ethnicities, other countries, other groups. Sometimes we throw it around as a joke, all of that. But once you start to reflect on yourself and you check yourself, that's when we'll see gender biases going down. We'll see generally biases going down. We must do our work so that the unconscious becomes conscious. And for it to become conscious so that we can then check it and stop it, we must get to know ourselves. We must take training seriously. We must, work on ourselves and build our skills. It's a muscle, right? Just like we build those other skills, you can build negotiation skills. You can also hone in on your skills in acknowledging your bias and addressing your bias.
Awesome answer. Oh my gosh, checking the bias, checking the unconscious bias. I want to give you one last example of unconscious bias. Do you know when you're driving and you see somebody who's driving really poorly and you have a tendency to think that's a woman? That's one thing I see. Women, men, everybody has that unconscious bias that, yeah, it must be. So there are numerous ways we can do this. And as Chara has said, we need to let the unconscious become conscious. And the only way to do it is to be alert. You know, when you are alert, you notice things. But when you're not careful and mindful about these gender biases, of course, they will go unchecked. And you have a conversation where you laugh about things. You know how Norette just shared with us a compliment that is not a compliment? That comes, that would not be told to a man, or you have nice legs. Men do have nice legs as well, right? But no, this is not something we tell to men, right? So these are small things that we need to check in. So I would say really be alert that these gender biases happen, and that's one way to get there. I would like to really thank you all, our audience, for joining us. We're coming to the end of our conversation. It's a first, not a last. But before I let you all go back to your usual activities, I would really want our panelists to tell us one encouragement word, one word that they want to leave with our audience. What would that be? I know I'm surprising you with this one, but we need to leave on the highest note as we came in. So tell us one word you would leave us with. Let me start with who? Norette, take it over.
My word's going to be hope.
Yes. Hope for better days with no gender biases. Amazing. Thank you so much, Norette. Chara?
I would say advocate.
Amen to advocating. Thank you, Chara. Let's all live with hope and start advocating. Dorcas? You're muted, Dorcas.
All right, I was saying it's a 2-word in a 1 word. Take action. That's.
Yes. Let's have hope and keep taking action and be advocates. Thank you, advocates, for this great cause. I'd like to really thank you all, our dear panelists, for taking the time to inspire us. I'm personally really encouraged and motivated to have and continue to have this conversation. To our amazing audience, please I want to give you a shout out first for tuning in, but I would really want you to help me thank our panelists who have been amazing and gave us all their best in this topic. So if you agree that they've been amazing, just type in or put in a clap or type in anything in the chat box so that we can encourage our panelists, because they really have done a great job. Yes, I see it. I hope the panelists can see all this love that's coming up for you guys. Thank you so much. We are all inspired. We are left with hope. We know we need to advocate and really take actions. I would like to say that we will continue to have these webinars to raise awareness on things like career and leadership. If you need more information, my co-host Usman will share that with you on email. We will share with you a brief summary of this conversation. Please feel free to share it around, to forward an email to your HR team, to your leaders, so that this conversation really can go far. We need to take action and become advocates, all of us. Thank you so much, everybody. And I will ask Usman to give us some music to usher us out of this great webinar. Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure for me to host this conversation.
Thank you very much for this amazing session, and thank you to our amazing panelists for joining. If you're still on the call, I want to say thank you again for being a part of the conversation. Please do not forget to check out our services. At Lead Access, we offer leadership training, leadership coaching, relationship coaching, wellness coaching, and different types of training for you. We'll be sharing with you a lot more details about that via the email. Once again, thank you very much for being a part of today's conversation. Thank you so much.